They called her a liability, her hands cursed with an untamable tremor. But when a 7-month siege pushed an entire valley to the brink, she was their only hope for a 3-mile miracle shot. The air in Hogan's Alley, the FBI's legendary training ground in Quantico, was thick with the smell of ozone and failure. On the massive screen dominating the tactical theater, a cascade of red data points polluted the image of a serene, blue silhouette. That silhouette was Sergeant Anya, Hex Volkov, and the red data was her betrayal. At 30 years old, Anya was a prodigy. Her ballistic calculations were faster than most dedicated software, her understanding of atmospheric science bordered on clairvoyant, and she could group shots within a quarter inch at 1,000 yards. But under pressure, her body had a secret, a fine, almost imperceptible tremor that started in her shooting hand. "Look at that," a voice cut through the silence, as cold and sharp as a scalpel. Master Gunnery Sergeant Elias, Judge Vance stood silhouetted against the screen, his shadow falling over Anya. He pointed a laser at the frantic spikes on her heart rate and biofeedback graphs. "That, Sergeant, is chaos. That is instability." Anya stood rigid in the center of the VR simulation chamber, the headset still warm on her face. The scenario had been a nightmare, a hostage situation on a moving train. She'd made the shot, but her vital signs, broadcast for all her peers to see, told a different story. "Sir, the hostage is safe." "The target was neutralized," Anya said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her cheeks. "You compensated, Volkov." "You got lucky," Vance countered, stepping into the light. His eyes, the color of faded steel, held no warmth. "In the field, luck runs out. When you're pinned down, when a team's life depends on your absolute stillness, that tremor will get them killed. On the battlefield, a tremor only brings home body bags." The other candidates shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. They had all seen it. The slight, uncontrollable vibration in her trigger finger, magnified 1,000 times on the diagnostic screen. A flaw. A curse. Later, in the debrief, Anya tried to explain. "Master Gunnery Sergeant, with all due respect, I don't believe it's a weakness. It's a heightened state. My nervous system is processing more data, not breaking down. It's overclocking." Vance almost laughed. "Overclocking? Sergeant, this is the Marine Corps, not a computer club. We need operators who are like rock. Unmovable. Predictable. You are a storm. And storms are liabilities." He stamped her evaluation file with a heavy, final-sounding thud. "Not recommended for extreme pressure deployment. Physiological limitations." The words were a death sentence to her career. As she walked away, the sting of failure was sharp. She had tried to suppress the tremor, to force her hand into rigid stillness during the simulation. The effort had cost her precious seconds and nearly ruined her aim. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that fighting it was the wrong approach. She didn't need to silence the storm. She needed to learn how to ride it. 7 months later, the nation's attention was fixed on a wound in the Alaskan wilderness. Ethelberg Ridge, a jagged spine of rock and ice, had been transformed into an impregnable fortress. Julian, the architect, Thorne, a disgraced but brilliant former army engineer, had turned an abandoned Cold War listening post into his personal kingdom. He and his heavily armed militia, the First Sons, had seized control of the Kestrel River Valley, the only access point to the region. For 210 days, the siege had been a catastrophic failure for federal forces. Thorne's fortress, a brutalist scar of concrete and steel embedded into a glacier, was a masterpiece of defensive engineering. It was protected by thermal sensors, automated gun emplacements, and a sophisticated network of jammers that rendered drones and guided munitions useless. Thorne, a ghost in his own machine, directed the defense with chilling precision. The cost of his rebellion was measured in human lives. 15,000 residents and scientific researchers in the valley were cut off, their supplies dwindling. Worse, a pediatric medical team, visiting a remote village when the siege began, was trapped with them. Every passing day was a roll of the dice for the children under their care. Traditional assaults had been repelled with bloody efficiency. Thorne seemed to anticipate every move, his defenses adapting like a living organism. FBI behavioral analysts were unanimous on one point: the First Sons were a cult of personality. If Thorne fell, the entire structure would collapse. But reaching him was impossible. In a sterile, fluorescent-lit command center hastily assembled at a nearby airbase, Colonel Patricia Jackson, the woman in charge of the Joint Task Force, pointed to a grainy satellite image on a large monitor. "His command center is here," she said, circling a reinforced window on the highest level of the bunker. "It's the brain. We cut it off, the body dies." She then swiped the screen to a topographical map. "The problem is, the nearest viable sniper position with a clear line of sight is this outcrop. We're calling it the nest. A murmur went through the room. The distance was displayed in stark red numbers: 4,828 meters. 3 miles. "That's not a shot, Colonel," someone muttered. "That's a prayer." Jackson's eyes scanned the room, landing on a figure standing silently in the back. "Maybe. Which is why I need someone who understands impossible odds." Her gaze fell on Anya Volkov, who had been flown in on AC-130 just hours before. "Sergeant Volkov. You're being assigned to Operation Longshot. Your mission is to reach the nest and provide a solution." Suddenly, Judge Vance, who had been brought in as a consultant, stepped forward. "Colonel, with all due respect, this is not the mission for this operator. The psychological pressure, the environmental extremes, her documented stress tremors will compromise the entire operation." Anya met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Master Gunnery Sergeant," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I have analyzed the ballistics. The shot is, theoretically possible. And I am the only one who understands how. The infiltration was a descent into a frozen hell." For 2 days, Anya and her spotter, Corporal Leo Echo Martinez, moved like ghosts through the Alaskan backcountry. The landscape was a stunning, lethal beauty of blue ice and razor-sharp rock. The wind was a physical entity, a shrieking beast that clawed at their gear and drove ice crystals into any exposed patch of skin. They called it the Katabatic, a river of dense, cold air that poured down from the glaciers, unpredictable and violent. Leo, whose call sign, Echo, came from his uncanny ability to read and relay the faintest environmental cues, was a rock of calm beside Anya's focused intensity. He carried the spotting scope and sensor package, while Anya bore the weight of their primary tool, a custom-built .416 Barrett rifle. Its experimental atmospheric data integration, ADI, scope was their only chance at making sense of the 3-mile gap. On the final approach to the nest, their blood ran cold. "Hex, hold," Leo whispered, his voice a crackle in her earpiece. "Thermal bloom. 12 o'clock high." Anya froze, melting into the shadow of a massive ice formation. A silent, sleek drone, one of Thorne's custom designs, drifted overhead. It moved with an unnatural quietness, its infrared eye scanning the snowfield for any sign of warmth. They had been warned about these. "Bury it," Anya ordered. Without a word, they dug frantically into a snowdrift, shoving the rifle and their packs deep inside before burying themselves. For 6 agonizing minutes, they lay motionless, the crushing weight of the snow on top of them, their breath held until their lungs burned. The cold seeped into their bones, a deep, invasive chill that felt permanent. Anya could feel the drone pass directly over them, a faint hum vibrating through the snow. Then, silence. When they finally emerged, shivering and gasping, they were dangerously close to hypothermia. The experience left a scar of fear, a stark reminder of how ruthlessly efficient their enemy was. The nest was a brutal, exposed ledge of rock offering minimal cover. It felt like sitting on the edge of the world. From here, Thorne's fortress looked like a malevolent toy, impossibly distant. They set up their hide, a camouflage net that did little to block the soul-crushing wind. For hours, they remained motionless, becoming part of the rock, while enemy patrols scanned the surrounding ridges through powerful optics. The psychological pressure was immense. A single wrong move, a glint of light off a lens, would mean a swift death. But Anya had trained for this. She entered a state of meditative stillness, her mind hyperalert, her body a frozen statue. "Echo, give me the numbers," she murmured, her breath fogging in the frigid air. Leo was already dialing in his scope. Range is 4,828 meters on the dot. Wind is a nightmare. 3 distinct layers. Ground level is 5 miles per hour, west-southwest. Mid-level is pushing 15, variable, from the north. Jet stream is. God, it's a mess up there. Temperature is -20 Fahrenheit and dropping. This isn't shooting, Hex. This is witchcraft. Anya looked through her own scope, her mind already a whirlwind of calculations. "That's why they call me Hex," she whispered. The wait was a form of torture. For hours, Anya lay behind the rifle, the cold metal a leech on her skin. The sun, a pale, useless disk in the Alaskan sky, offered no warmth, only a strange, perpetual twilight that played tricks on the eyes. The pressure mounted with every gust of wind, every tick of the clock. In the back of her mind, a ghost whispered. "That tremor will get them killed." Judge Vance's voice, as clear as if he were standing beside her. For a moment, she felt the old sting of shame. She remembered the red lines on the screen, the averted eyes of her teammates. She pushed it away, replacing it with cold, hard numbers. The shot was a monstrous equation with a dozen shifting variables. Bullet drop would be over 2,500 inches. Spin drift, the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation, the subtle pull of the polar magnetic field, all had to be accounted for. But the wind was the true demon. "Echo, talk to me," she commanded, her voice low. "The katabatic is pulsing," Leo reported, his eye glued to his scope. "I'm seeing microvortices peeling off that glacier to our left. They're not on any weather model. They'll push the round down and left in the final 1,000 yards." Anya processed this, her mind building a four-dimensional map of the bullet's path. She could almost see it, a tiny speck of copper and lead on its long journey through layers of hostile air. This was beyond the textbook. This was intuition. Then, she felt it. The familiar tingle in her right hand. The tremor. It started faintly, a low hum of energy. In the past, she would have fought it, tensing her muscles, trying to crush it into submission. But now she welcomed it. She closed her eyes for a second, ignoring the target, ignoring the pressure. She focused entirely on the sensation. It wasn't chaos. It was a signal. A feedback loop. Her body was talking to her, translating the immense stress and the torrent of sensory data into a physical rhythm. "It's not a flaw," she thought, a fierce clarity cutting through the mental fog. "It's my antenna. It's feeling the things the instruments can't measure. The vibration of the rock, the pressure shifts in the air, it's all here." A memory surfaced, trying to suppress the tremor in the VR simulation and failing. She had been fighting her own nature. Don't fight it. Use it. She opened her eyes. The world looked different, sharper. She began to consciously relax her hand, letting the tremor find its natural frequency. It was a fine, rhythmic vibration, almost like a musical note. She started to sync her breathing to it. Inhale on the upbeat, exhale on the downbeat. Her heart rate, which had been elevated, began to slow, falling into lockstep with her hand and her breath. "Hex. You with me?" Leo asked, a note of concern in his voice. "I'm here, Echo," she replied, her voice calmer than it had been all day. "I'm just tuning the instrument." Movement. Leo's voice was a sharp crackle. "Target is at the window. He's on his comms. This is it, Hex. You have maybe 30 seconds before he moves. Anya's eye was already pressed to the scope. Through the layers of shimmering air, she saw him, Julian Thorne, a tiny, arrogant figure, silhouetted against the light of his command center. He was holding a radio, pacing with an air of absolute invincibility. 3 miles away. An impossible distance. Her heart rate spiked, and the tremor in her hand intensified. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't the frantic vibration of fear. It was a powerful, controlled surge of energy. She didn't fight it. She leaned into it, embracing the rhythm she had just discovered. Her hand, her rifle, and her body were now a single, synchronized system. Instead of trying to hold the crosshairs perfectly still on the distant target, a futile task in these conditions, she allowed the tremor to guide them. The reticle began to move in a tiny, fluid figure-8 pattern, a dance of micro-corrections guided by her subconscious. It was a technique no one had ever taught her, a theory she had only hypothesized. Dynamic stability. Using controlled motion to create a more perfect point of aim. Wind has shifted half a degree north, Leo fed her. Barometer just dropped. Now, Hex. Take the shot now. Her world narrowed to the space between heartbeats. The figure-8 of the reticle tightened. Her breathing, her pulse, and the tremor in her hand all converged on a single, perfect moment of stillness at the apex of the pattern. Now. She squeezed the trigger. The report of the .416 Barrett was a deafening crack that was instantly swallowed by the vast Alaskan silence. The bullet left the barrel at over 3,000 feet per second, a messenger on a 6-second journey into history. Anya remained perfectly still, her eye locked on the scope, watching the world through the optic. Leo tracked the bullet's vapor trail with his spotting scope, his voice a low, tense countdown. Flight time 2 seconds, it's holding true through the first shear layer. 4 seconds, dear God, it's still stable. 6 seconds. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Then, at exactly 6.2 seconds after she fired, the impossible happened. The tiny figure in the distant window vanished. Not in a spray of red, but simply, gone. A moment later, a secondary, much larger explosion erupted from the base of the command tower. A shower of sparks and debris. Target down. Confirmed hit. Leo screamed, his voice raw with disbelief. Hex, you did it. Target is neutralized. Wait. Secondary explosion. You hit the main power relay. Their whole defense grid is going dark. The shot had been perfect. The .416 round had not only eliminated Thorne but had passed through the window and the interior wall, striking a critical energy conduit for the fortress's automated defenses. It was a 1 in a billion shot. A shot guided not just by math, but by a tremor that understood the secrets of the wind. The collapse of the first suns was as swift as it was total. Without the architect's genius to guide them, the fortress's defenders descended into chaos. The automated defenses, crippled by the loss of the power relay, fell silent. Federal assault teams, who had been beaten back for months, poured into the gaps, meeting only disorganized resistance. Within 2 hours, the siege was over. All hostages were recovered safely. The Kestrel River Valley was free. When Anya and Leo returned to the command center, exhausted and frostbitten, they were met with stunned silence, followed by a thunderous ovation. Master Gunnery Sergeant Elias, Judge Vance pushed through the crowd. He stood before Anya, his face a mask of complex emotions. He took the ballistics report from a technician's hand, his eyes tracing the impossible data. He looked up, not just at Anya, but at everyone in the room. For years, he said, his voice thick with emotion, we have searched for operators who are like machines. Steady. Unflinching. Rock solid. He paused, his gaze locking with Anya's. Sergeant Volkov has taught us that we were wrong. We were looking for the absence of humanity. True strength, it seems, lies in embracing it. In the instincts and adaptations that can't be measured by our instruments. He walked directly to Anya. I evaluated your data, he said, his voice now low and personal. You evaluated the entire world. I owe you an apology, Sergeant. The story of the 3-mile shot became legend. News reports called it the miracle on the ridge. But for Anya, the greatest validation came a week later, in the form of a simple envelope. Inside, there was no letter. Just a photograph. It showed a dozen smiling children, playing in the Alaskan sun outside a small clinic. On the back, a single sentence was written in a doctor's hurried script: you gave them back their future. Anya's technique, her method of syncing her body's stress responses with her actions, was officially named the Volkov Protocol. It revolutionized marksmanship training, shifting the focus from pure rigidity to biomechanical harmony. Today, Anya leads the advanced marksmanship program, teaching a new generation of snipers that what society might label a flaw can be, when understood and controlled, their greatest asset. Her story proves that the most profound limitations are often the ones we accept from others, or impose upon ourselves. Have you ever been underestimated because of something that makes you different? Share your story in the comments below. Let's discuss how our unique traits can become our greatest strengths. Please, comment with respect for everyone's personal journey. And if Anya's triumph resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of the impossible made possible.